without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our first speaker, Shameka Friedenstein, aka Miss Shameka. She has nearly a decade of experience under her belt and brings a wealth of expertise to the mental health field. She has a passion for helping people overcome trauma that's contagious, and she's dedicated her career to empowering individuals to move past their toughest experiences. She draws on her certifications in trauma-resilient communities and trauma-focused and racial trauma therapies. But that's not all. When she's not hard at work, you can also catch her spiking a volleyball, navigating white waters on a kayak, or strolling along the gorgeous walking bridge in Louisville. So needless to say, she offers both counseling and inspiration in equal measure. Without further ado, please welcome Miss Shameka.
Good morning. I am so excited to be here with you all this morning and welcome. So, I will be talking about how to talk to your kids so they will listen. Ever wonder what to do when you're talking to your kids and it feels like it's going in one ear and out the other? Or when it's frustrating, you're just like, I just don't know what to do. They're not hearing me and I'm frustrated. Well, I've got some ideas for you all. These are things that I use personally when I'm working one-on-one with kids or even in groups. But the first thing is we naturally just want to go into finding that solution and fixing the problem. And what we really, really want to do is we want to start by just pausing and we want to actually listen and hear what your child is saying. And that can be so hard and so difficult when it is escalated. And so the first thing is before anything, any form of communication, you want to make sure that those basic needs are being met. So, are they safe? Is the environment around them safe? And are we able to connect with our child in that moment? So, we want to start by being able to actually listen. And what that looks like is stop whatever you are doing, whatever that is, whether it is at home, you are at school, or you are even in the grocery store. And that behavior is just so frustrating for you. So you want to pause and you want to be able to connect with your child in that moment and really hear what they are feeling and see what they are feeling. And so how do we do that? We get down on their level. As adults, we tend to we're standing, we're already naturally taller than them. We want to make that one-on-one eye connection with our child. So if we need to get down on our knee, we need to make that eye contact. And then we just start by generally just asking and just seeing what is happening with our child. So if they're upset, acknowledge that sounds really frustrating. Or I can see that you're really, really hungry, and hear what they're saying. Be present with them in that moment. And then we want to attune with our child. So if they're crying, acknowledge, I can see that this is upsetting. Validate what you are seeing with your own eyes. That helps us to acknowledge and validate our child's feeling. It helps us and the child to see they are present with me and they are here and understanding, like, this is hard. And kids don't always have the words to say, this is how I'm feeling. So sometimes we have to be able to name that emotion for that child. This looks like you are frustrated. This seems like you may be feeling sad. And then that allows for the child to be able to take ownership of their emotion and say, yes, this is how I'm feeling, or no, that's not quite it. And then they can name that emotion for themselves, or they can say, this is what's going on, or this is what I need. And so what that does is that allows for you all to connect, and it helps that child to feel like I can trust my own feelings and my own thoughts. And so once that happens, once they're able to name that emotion, once you're able to connect and actually hear what the issue is, then we're able to then be able to move further on. So when a kid is expressing their emotion, we tend to focus on the behavior instead of the emotion of what's happening for that child. And so a way that a kid feels, they usually react, and that's what the behavior that we see. And so when we take that away, or we focus on the child and not the behavior, then it takes away from being able to really see excuse me, to really being able to see what is happening for that child in that moment. And we are so quick to come up with a solution, and really, that child tends to already have a solution in mind. So, as parents, as teachers, as adults, other things that we can do to really help connect and communicate with that child is join them in their world. So, if it's no, they don't want to complete a certain task, or they're showing frustration or anger, there's a reason behind that emotion and behind that feeling. So the root thing that we need to do is figure out what is it that our child, your child, is trying to show you, trying to tell you. And sometimes it shows an anger or sadness or frustration because they don't have the words to communicate, so they act that thing out instead of being able to verbalize. And we so often want our child to be able to verbalize and hear what we're saying instead of being able to hear and see what they are trying to communicate to us. And it takes time. It is not easy. This is not an easy task. This is days and weeks and months and years of being able to really create that atmosphere for your child. And one of the things that is important is you have feelings too. So you get to verbalize your emotions as well. So when you're communicating and you're trying to connect, that is being able to also step back and being able to communicate, this made me feel really frustrated. And why? I was really scared when you ran across the street because I thought something horrible was going to happen to you, instead of you get back across the street now, because those sends two different messages to your child. One is more fear based, and one is, I am really, really concerned for you. And what that does is it allows for the child to see this behavior makes my adult feel scared. And by being able to identify that, then they're also able to make the connection of, this adult really cares about me. And so when we're able to make those connections, we are able to connect with our child. Now, when your kid is escalated and there's certain things that we really, really want our child to do, sometimes things don't get done in the time that we want, in the manner that we want, and that's okay. We've got to be able to pause and be able to deal with that emotion or that behavior in that moment. And sometimes that looks a little messy, but what that does is it shows your child that in that moment, they are what is most important to you. And so being able to express, to name that emotion for that child, being able to allow for them to attempt to name that and to share with you, hey, this is what's going on with me. This is what I am feeling, or to show you there are themes. So paying attention to the nonverbals are just as important as the verbal. And so being able, once you move past expressing the emotions and naming the emotions, to be able to set the expectation. You know, if you want to go across the street, I just would like for you to hold my hand. I would like for you to let me know, and we can do this together. When you are hungry, it's okay for you to tell me that you're hungry instead of knocking everything off the shelf, because then that makes me feel nervous. And then ways to amend. So if they did something wrong, you being able to model for that child, this is what I would like for you to do instead. And a lot of times when we are communicating with our child, especially in escalated situations, we tend to escalate with our child, and they are picking up on our emotions just as much as we are picking up on theirs. And so if we are escalated and we're frustrated, our child is seeing that and they are matching that energy. So if we present ourselves as calm, even when we're frustrated and upset, they can also mirror that. And that goes miles. That allows for the child to see alternatives to being able to feel safe in that environment. And a lot of times when behaviors and emotions are really escalated, it is truly because they are feeling unheard, they are not feeling safe. And it is our jobs as those adults and as those support systems for our child to create that environment for them, even when it feels impossible and like an impossible task. And there are tons of different ways. It's not a one method shop. It is, there's so many different ways to do this. And so allowing that time, allowing that space, and opening the floor for that communication. Sometimes it's a pausing, dealing with that behavior, to just be present with our child in that moment and dealing with the behavior later. That's not saying we're forgetting about it. That's not saying that it is a problem behavior, because at the end of the day, we really want to make sure that our kids are safe. But at the moment, we've got to be able to say, is it okay and necessary in this moment to deal with the behavior? Or do I need to be here and be present and really understand what my child is trying to express to me? And so, giving our children a choice. We want to give consequences to those behaviors. We want to give punishment. And a lot of times it's not helpful, because what it's doing is it's not dealing with the behavior, it's short term. And our children usually don't really remember what the punishment has to do with what they're feeling. And so we want to make sure that what we're doing and our action has to do with what the behavior and what our child was feeling in that moment. So I'm feeling scared and I don't want to go home because I have to be in my room all day. And that's going to make me really, really sad and really frustrated and have behaviors, versus other alternatives of, you had a difficult day at school and let's figure out what's happening at school. Tell me what's happening. I'm getting picked on. So if I'm getting isolated in my room, does that deal with me getting picked on at school? No. And so the punishment or the consequence doesn't address the fact that your child is scared or angry or sad because they're getting picked on at school. And so we want to continue to acknowledge and validate the feelings for our kids and allow for them to feel safe to do so. And when that doesn't happen, then our child doesn't feel like they can trust their own emotions. They don't feel like they can communicate and trust you to help them in those difficult moments. And it continues to have the same behaviors occur. And so when we're thinking about ways to communicate and really ways to connect, it is truly, truly, truly hearing your child. It is being able to be present, put aside your own thoughts and feelings for just a moment, and allowing for them to be able to say and acknowledge how they feel and just show you. So sometimes it's through play. Sometimes it's they are physically showing you that something's not quite right and they don't know how to say it. And so it's okay to say, are you feeling a little angry? It seems like you're feeling angry. Or if there's a task that you want your child to complete, I know that you really, really want to continue to play, but it is time for us to be able to go A, B, C, or D. And we don't move past that until the child is able to say, okay, and moving towards that direction or that task that you've asked them to do. And sometimes it is a quick response and they get it. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer and you may be late to that thing. You may be, it may feel a little frustrating that it took so long for little Johnny to finally put down that favorite toy and do what you're asking him to do. But that consistency, that confirmation of, hey, I validate your feelings and I see that this is something that you really don't want to do, but this is also my expectation. And that allows for the kid to make that connection and see that we are not moving on to the next step until what you've asked him to do or her to do has been accomplished, as you continue to validate what you're seeing. And so that means that you are able to name that emotion. You're able to say, this seems really tough. You don't want to quit this activity. And then being able to say, this is what I expect of you, or this is what I need. And it is one at a time. It's not all at once, because it could be really overwhelming and really stressful for those kids. And then the next thing is just being able to allow for your child to express themselves however that looks like. And so when it's frustrating at school or at home, the most important thing is being able to say, and acknowledge and to be there with them in that moment and saying, and showing them non-verbally. You sit with them if they're not able to move on from that task. You put it down to one word, because we really want to over explain a lot of the time. And when we over explain, it truly goes in one ear and out the other. They are not hearing what we're saying, they're not comprehending, they're focused on what they really want to do. And that's all that they can think about and see in that moment. And so that may mean that we are having as adults to say, I still see that toy's not picked up. Toy, I still see that toy, but giving them the opportunity to do that thing that you're asking them to do, and allowing them that choice. So if this toy isn't picked up, then this thing cannot happen. We can't go to the birthday party if we're not able to pick up the toy. And what that does is, even though it is a non-preferred thing, they still have a choice. And that takes away any guilt or shame that you may feel as an adult in that moment. They chose not to pick up the toy, so they chose not to go to the birthday party. And so being able to validate and allow for that child to express how they're feeling and what they need, however they choose to do so. Um, and then from there, um, as they complete that task or that feeling, other ways that we communicate is being able to put down our electronics or the thing that's distracting us from being able to connect with that kid. So often it's, oh, they've got all the toys or they've got all these things, and there isn't a reason for them to be upset. But behaviors are a way of them saying, I need something else. I need a way to connect. And in the world that we live in of distractions and electronics, and work, it's so easy to get caught up in all of those things instead of taking time to stop and get off our electronics and look at our child when they're explaining how their day was at school, or talking to us about anything that they're interested in. So being able to truly, truly be able to be present and connect with our child. And a lot of times it's, I was sitting next to you, and it really it's, but you weren't hearing me, you weren't connecting. And so they're able to truly, truly feel like they are connecting with you when you are making that contact, when they can see that they are important to you in that moment. You're validating and acknowledging their feelings, what's important to them, and even any difficulties that they may be having. And when we're able to connect and attune, which means that if my child is talking to me really calmly, I'm talking to them calmly. I'm down on their level with my voice, and I'm able to truly hear what it is that they are saying to me. And they are able to pick that up and be able to say, in their minds, okay, I feel comfortable enough to then move on to it, further tell them about my day. I told them a little bit. Did they really, really hear me? Did they hear that it was a little frustrating, or did it kind of go in one ear and out the other? They are smart. They pick up on everything. And so we can't get over on them. So are we really, really connecting with our child, or are we distracted and partially attunative to what they are saying and expressing to us? Even if it may seem silly to us, it is important to them. Even if it is a drawing, or if it's something that happened in a different environment, it is important to them. And so for us to be able to hear those concerns, or to hear the things that are important to our child, it allows for them to trust you as that a safe adult to continue to come to and talk to when things are really, really exciting, and they're really excited, or when it's really hard and really frustrating and things just didn't go well. And it's hard when it's an escalated behavior, but if we escalate with them, we're not helping the problem. So our goal is to be able to show them that even in this really difficult time, really difficult situation, they're okay. They are allowed to feel how they feel. And there is no wrong feeling. There is no bad emotion. And there's so many times where I have kids that say, "Oh, Miss Shameka, I felt angry and that was bad." No, it's not bad to feel angry. they get to choose how to respond. And so our goal is, how are we helping them choose positive ways to respond to difficult situations? How are we helping them to learn different ways to connect and communicate those feelings and emotions? And how are we showing them? If as adults it's hard for us sometimes to be able to control our own emotions, how hard can it be for our children whose brain hasn't completely developed to control their emotions? So we have to be able to model for them the behavior that we expect, but then to say it's okay to feel angry, it's okay to feel sad, and give them the supports to be able to do that. Um, and then lastly, showing them that you love them. So even if it's a really, really difficult thing, hug your child. Let them know that you love them. Let them know that you are there in any capacity to support them. Because at the end of the day, all the behaviors and all the emotions, it kind of goes out the window when your child just wants to know that they are loved by you. And so that is all that I have for you today. And thank you for allowing me to be here.
Sorry about that. I was muted. We're flying by the seat of our pants here, but uh, Shameka, thank you very much. I want to say, as a new parent myself, I think you offer a lot of good, uh, just pearls of wisdom that are essential for no matter whether you're a new parent like myself or have a child that's maybe even a teenager. Uh, Making that connection is hugely important. Uh, and I want to add, as just as an aside, if anyone does have any questions throughout this presentation, just include them in the chat. We'll be glad to do that. But I do have a question for you.
Sure.
Obviously, I have a child that I can't verbally communicate with, but it did make me start to think, there are parents out there that might have a child that is nonverbal or neurodiverse or maybe has special needs. How does that change, or would you have any suggestions on how you can better make those connections with maybe a child that you can't as easily have be verbal with them?
Sure, yes. So a lot of times through play that comes out, but then being able to just name for that child, I notice this thing. So I see. So like if a child is feeling frustrated or upset, being able to help name that emotion for that child, and they will show you what they are feeling. They will show you. And so even for babies, they are nonverbal. They cannot tell you how they feel, but they will cry until that need is met. And so that means that sometimes you're trying a lot of different methods to figure out how to meet that need of that child. And even in nonverbal, they're able to show you like, no, that's not what I need, and show you this is that how to meet that need. So if it's they're frustrated because they can't get a certain task done, or they're frustrated that things didn't go their way, it tends to repeat until that need gets met. And so being able for us to be present and self-aware for that child really helps to connect, and being able to allow for that nonverbal child to be able to show us what they need or how they would like to communicate. So sometimes that they draw, sometimes they write, and sometimes that's us coming down to their level. We've got to be able to meet our child, your child, where they're at. And we can't talk to them over their heads. We can't talk to them more than their developmental stage, because they're not going to make that connection. So being able to meet that child where they're at is going to really, really go a long way with helping to make that connection and being able to pay attention to those nonverbals. You can tell by body language how someone is feeling sometimes. You're able to be able to name for that child, hey, this seems like this is really difficult. And then they will try to do different things, or shake their head or nod, and that's how they will communicate with you the way that they feel comfortable. And over time, different situations occur that'll have you to adjust to being able to meet those needs of that child.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, I guess I also want to ask as well. I know uh, as parents, sometimes we also have to, obviously we can't. We all have to work, and so sometimes we have to take our kids to say like their grandparents or their aunt and uncle, who might not, I guess, have the opportunity to be with the child as much and understand those connection needs.
Right.
How could you, I guess, talk about that with your caregivers, I guess, without sounding like overly patronizing, like they don't know, necessarily what they're doing, but more so how to empower them to make those connections in a way that lets them know that you're looking out for the child's best interest without necessarily trying to tell them, what to do, if that makes sense.
Like ways for the other adults that watch your child to connect with your child.
Yes.
So it could a lot of different ways. Being able to share with them the interests of your child, things that they really like, things that are really important to them. Um, Being able to say, hey, when this really difficult thing happens, this is what has worked for us at home. And really, that's a really good question because a lot of times in different environments, there are different stressors or there are different things that happen. And of course, everyone has different methods of how they take care of kids and interact with kids. And that's okay. Well, there are wrong ways, but the positive ways can look a little bit differently. So you being able to share, hey, as dad, this is what works really, really well with my child. And if you're able to do that, that would really help my child to feel safe, to feel heard, to feel like they can come to you and trust because they have to be able to build that rapport and that trust with that child. And so you being able to share your personal knowledge as dad really allows for anyone else watching or interacting with your child to have that same shared knowledge. And that is something that can kind of go out the window sometimes is my child is in your hands and that's your job and that's what you focus on instead of being able to work as a team and a unit. And that is something that actually is really, really important for cohesiveness and really for your child to see that consistency throughout.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one more question.
Sure.
It sounds like you as you talk, I just hear this wealth of information, and I don't know if anyone else watches this thinks like, man, there's so much I don't know about, how to make these connections with my kid. Have you ever, as a professional, found yourself in a situation where maybe you also maybe had a struggle connecting with the kid, and how did you overcome that?
Yes, a few times. Really, at the end of the day, I have a kid and he's a teenager, and he doesn't talk a whole lot, and that's just by his choice. He's really just calm and down to earth. And so when we would talk, it was just like yes, no. And so what I did was I asked him about his interest and was able to help through that. He started to open up and talk, and his interest was about shoes, and that may not be my interest, but he felt comfortable to say that, I really, really like this thing, and this is why. And so what that did is that allowed for him to talk about something that was comfortable. That allowed for me to connect and begin to build that relationship with him. And then from there, it opened doors to other conversations and other things that were really important to him. So, and ways that he began to self-praise himself, where he otherwise would just isolate and kind of internalize different situations because it's harder for him and just really kind of how he processes things to interact with people. That wasn't comfortable for him. So finding that door in is really, really what that's all about. Being able to find that connection and that way to connect with that individual and that child allows for them to share a little bit about who they are and the things that are important. It may be important to the adult to really talk about this really difficult behavior, but for that child, that is not what's most important to them in that moment. And so really, really being able to acknowledge, hey, this is where this kid is right now. This is what's really important, and attuning to that and addressing that and connecting with your child through that.
Awesome. Shameka, thank you very much for your time today. I think having a connection with your children, whether you're a parent or a caregiver, or as I know Stu would say, parent is anyone who's doing the work of helping to raise children. So I think part of parenting obviously is having that connection with their child first and foremost. So thank you for sharing your wisdom, as well as all the work you've been doing over the years, both as a clinician as well as being part of the Mr. Stu TV program. For those that do or don't know, be sure you can catch Miss Shameka at Mr. Stu TV on YouTube and Facebook. And I look forward to continuing to work with you, Shameka, and seeing some more of the great work that I know you'll continue to do.